Hello, ladies and gentlemen, it is I, SpooderMan, and sorry Hollowed couldn't join us. I know you want to see his face badly, but he is currently working on his movie, but I'll be filling in today, alright? So let's dive into today's video. So most of us know Splatoon, right? It's a game that was released on the Wii U in the year 2015 on May. And it caught the world by surprise. It was a pretty nice game, decent graphics, a good story. So let's dive into the history of the game. The game takes place 14,000 years after our present time. But 100 years before the time of the game, there was a great turf war, as we know by the second scrolls of the story. But there's a question I've always wanted to ask. Like, we know the Inklings, they have male and female. Pretty self-explanatory, right? Beat the game, get the freshest gear around. But you enter story mode, right? And why are the Octolings, there's female, but there's no male. The only male is Octavio, and then you see these mutants running around. So then you're like, wait a minute, how come we don't have this? What's the story behind it? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I have developed a theory that might answer this question. So sit back, relax, and grab your popcorn, and let's dive right in. Alright, so let's start with the Great Turf War. I like to compare this to Fallout for just a bit. Let's go back to 100 years ago. The Inklings and the Octolings, as we know, were once close allies. But unfortunately, due to rising sea levels, they had to be pushed further into the land, causing the resources to be limited. This is bad because it began to form tensions between the Octolings and the Inklings, and eventually they erupted into the war. Now, let's skip into the last battle. As you know, it was the Inklings who had won the war, and the Octolings were forced down to live underground. This is where my theory begins. The male Octolings are really extinct. Now you may be wondering, well, how did they survive for 100 years if the male Octolings were extinct? Well, that, my friend, I can answer. And not just me, the Octoballs, the Octo-Snipers, and all those mutants can probably answer your question. That's right. They are the males, but not the males from the war. They're in fact failed experiments. I believe the Octolings were trying to recreate males, and unfortunately failed through the process. These were caused by bioengineering, but failed multiple times. So instead of disposing of them, Octavio used them as for soldiers. Now you're wondering, how did the female survive? Well, that, my friend, is the help of cloning machines. No, not Octavio keeping them all pleasure. I don't think he can withstand that much. But it was the cloning machines that have kept them alive for all the time. As you can tell, these Octolings or Octoballs, Octo-Snipers, they were the attempts of trying to recreate male Octolings. But unfortunately, they didn't have the specific material. I think this is where probably the Zapfish come in. I think they needed more power in order to recreate the perfect male. It's unfortunate, though. You've lost all your males by the war. How did they lose in the war? Well, as you know, the machines had failed to, succeed since the plug was pulled, insinuating that they didn't have a perfect power source. So, unfortunately, they were forced to gun combat, hand-to-hand combat. Well, probably not hand-to-hand, but, more of a splat combat. And unfortunately, because there were no revival machines back then, unfortunately they all perished. And only a handful of males survived, or at least less than a handful. So much so that they just couldn't move on by themselves, and unfortunately, they all ran out of life before that. But if you're wondering how Octavio survived, I suspect he was able to live long enough for revival machines to be invented, and because of that, he was able to survive long enough. After the war, they devoted their time into recreating males as much as possible, with bioengineering and cloning machines to find a way to keep them alive, and hopefully not being driven into an extinction. And that brings the end to my small little theory on why male Octolings never appear in the game. But who really knows, right? As you know, Splatoon 2 is going to be coming out somewhere within this year, and maybe hopefully Nintendo will shed a little more light on why they don't exist. Maybe they do exist in the next game. Who really knows? This is just my little idea. I wanted to get out before it, flew out of my head. This has been me, SpooderMan, and I'll see you all later. the resources not going around. There was an energy crisis, if I'm not mistaken. I Let's start with the Great Turf War. I like to compare this to Fallout a little bit, but don't get triggered. All right. So basically, what happened was, as you know, in the beginning, so let's start with the Great Turf War, right? I like to compare this a little bit to Fallout. What happens is Inklings and Octolings, it's causing them to, even with this causing them, alright, and because there are no males, oh man, I don't know how they can handle it, JK, but anyway, this is where the misunderstanding, this is